Educas use some key technical vocabulary on their specification that is fundamental to the whole of our understanding of Component 2, Philosophy of Religion. In Theme 1, Arguments for the Existence of God, the first three topics, A to C, are regarding inductive arguments. The following three, D to F, are concerning deductive arguments. You must know and understand what these terms mean and how such arguments work if you are to proceed further with this course of study. The word philosophy comes from the ancient Greek language. It literally means love, phileo, of wisdom, sophos. Philosophy is primarily about establishing truth or knowledge, and inevitably there are a number of different approaches that are said to be able to achieve this. A.J. Ayer said that the business of philosophy is to clarify and analyse, and so two concerns of philosophy are to clarify the meaning of language so that we can agree what exactly we mean when we make statements, and to identify ways to test for logical coherency within a claim or an argument. A philosophical argument is one which consists of a number of premises that lead to or support a conclusion. The information in the conclusion must be derived from the information in the premises, and so no new information should be added in. An example of a philosophical argument of this nature is a syllogism, which means a three-line argument consisting of two premises and a conclusion. There are two types of philosophical argument that you need to know in order to study Theme 1, Arguments for the Existence of God. The first is deductive. A deductive argument is one whereby a conclusion is arrived at, which is the only possible conclusion given the preceding premises. The premises, if correct, mean that there are no other possible conclusions, and so it must be true. In this instance, it should be impossible to doubt the conclusion. The second kind of argument is an inductive one. An inductive argument is one which functions in much the same way as a deductive argument. However, the conclusion is one of a number of possibilities. Our work, then, is to try and decide how convincing the possible conclusions are in order to decide which one is more likely to be correct. In our previous example of Socrates, this syllogism is deductive. Since all men are mortal, there can be no other possible conclusion if we agree that Socrates is a man. So we have established that a deductive argument is one in which the conclusion is unavoidable if the premises are correct. An example of an inductive argument is as follows. Here, if the premises are correct, then the conclusion is possible. However, there is more than one way to develop diabetes, and a high sugar diet is not the only factor. In fact, it is not even a necessary factor. We might find it convincing that Fred's choice of diet is a good one when assessing his risk of diabetes, but we would need to look at numerous other indicators too. It is vital then, with an inductive argument, that we weigh up how likely the conclusion is, even though we might accept it as possible. So too with the arguments for the existence of God. With a deductive argument, we should be forced to accept God's existence, whereas with an inductive argument, we would weigh up how probable, convincing, or persuasive we find the arguments. Having said all this, it is important to understand that all this is only the case if the argument has been effectively constructed. As philosophers, we must first test an argument for validity. A valid argument is one which obeys the laws of logic. It does not introduce any information into the conclusion which is not present in the premises. It does not make a leap to a conclusion which is not supported by the premises. An argument may be a valid one, though, and still be open to dismissal. Take the following example. In this argument, the premises do lead directly to the conclusion, but the argument is still wrong. This is because the premises are wrong. A sound argument is one which is valid and also in which the premises are true. This example again is erroneous because premise 2 is incorrect. This leads us to a wrong conclusion, even though the argument itself is valid. It is thus not sound. When we assess philosophical arguments, we should ask ourselves, are the premises true? Is the argument valid? If the argument is inductive, how persuasive is it? In addition to all this, we must also be aware of the kind of reasoning processes that are possible. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. Here there are two epistemological approaches. Firstly, empiricist. This is more popular in today's world and feeds the modern scientific model. It means that we require physical or sensory evidence to support the truth or falsity of a claim, and that we base our reasoning upon such empirical data. In this example, your reasoning requires sensory evidence from the world. The second approach would be rationalist. This approach doubts the reliability of empirical data, pointing out that it is subject to change and decay and is open to misinterpretation. Such an approach would value pure reason above and beyond such evidence, suggesting that the only route to true knowledge is through reason alone. In the example, it is not necessary to move into the empirical world to check the truth or falsity of the statement. It is logic. An argument that uses no empirical data to support its reasoning would be called an a priori argument. This means prior to empirical or sensory information. Mathematical reasoning may be a priori, since maths deals with numbers, quite apart from physical or sensory support. The other approach, which is based on what we know from sensory information, is known as a posteriori. This means after sensory or physical evidence. Such arguments look at the physical evidence and then create reasoned arguments based upon it.